We are live, good baby.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby.
It's tequila.
Oh, tequila, baby. What's happening? Getting into it.
Yeah. Hello. You know, we like to go over to the live stream here and check it out and see who's complaining, see if you hear our audio. What's going on? What's going on? Max slapped me once and my life changed for good.
Okay, good. Good idea. I got my grenade. My Bitcoin grenade right here, ready to do battle against all the FUD.
How about the talk? What do you think of the talk? The talk happened. So, you know, when they announced this whole B word thing, I don't even know who arranged it really, but when they announced the B word that happened yesterday, which is why we did not microdose yesterday, we were watching the talk that happened between Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk. Cathie Wood stole the show, but when it was first announced, what I thought it was going to be was that I thought it was going to be Jack Dorsey trying to orange pill Elon Musk. Instead, it was like these three were presented as these kind of experts on Bitcoin and what was their opinion and things like that. So, yeah. What did you think?
Well, the presentations that came before were all excellent.
Sure.
Lynn Alden, Nick Carter, a few others.
Lynn Alden,
Nick Carter, a few others. Like they gave really great presentations, you know, on energy use and everything, decentralization. And when those four people came on, it was anticlimactic. They really didn't seem to know much. The moderator, the problem was that the moderator didn't do his job as moderator. So being a moderator in this instance has a very specific task to do, and that is to keep the conversation focused, on point. Don't let anybody hijack the conversation and then go down a rabbit hole, start to digress into a million places. And that's what Elon did. So Elon was just allowed to give him all the time he wanted to go down 100 different paths, and he said lots of different things. Some of it made no sense. Some of it was, could be construed as making some sense, right? But you don't get a sense he's got a coherent approach to this whatsoever. And he said some blatantly cringeworthy things about nodes and about shit coins and things like that. So all in all, it was a big waste of time. The previous conversations, though, on the call were all really good.
Good morning, everybody. Everybody's in the comments section leaving their messages. Of course, you should also go smash that like button before I have to do a minute of silence. I haven't done one of those in a while, but yeah, I thought I was surprised about how, I guess, dumb on this stuff that Elon Musk seemed. He came across as not very intelligent. He did note that, however, that the state has a monopoly on violence and that this is a reason for Bitcoin. He also did mention and complain about the negative interest rates on his on Tesla's bank accounts in Europe. And that's kind of the theme of this show, because that's what stood out for me when he was, whatever he said yesterday. That was the one thing that was interesting to me. Not much else that he said was interesting. But this ties into this New York Times editorial, the op-ed piece that is doing the rounds today, basically calling for a digital dollar and using negative rates as a feature of this. The New York Times is presenting this as that this is a good thing, that we want this. Whereas here, a business person was complaining about the negative interest rates across Europe and acting as if it was the most absurd thing he had ever heard of.
Right. So this exposes the fact that fiat money, the U.S. dollar, is the same as a frequent flyer mile. Right. The airline gives you frequent flyer miles to get you to come and fly more. And they have the ability to, as they're doing now post COVID, rapidly debase them to prompt you to go buy a flight. And in the
Sure.
US economy, they give you trillions of dollars worth of these coupons, US dollars, to cycle into the economy, hoping you're going to spend them. They don't want you to save them because just like the airlines don't want you to save these frequent flyer miles, they want you to use them to get more into the economy of the airline. And so it really just shows that the fiat money world and the U.S. economy and the global economy is set up purely for corporations, and they print all the fun coupons to allow people to buy the corporate products. And so it's an amusement park. We used to have S&H green stamps when I was a kid.
Mm.
You go to the grocery store and you get these green stamps and you put them in a book. And when you get 100 books, you can buy a toaster, right? It's just it's a gaming currency. Like in the 1990s in the dot-com world, we had lots of gaming currencies, a lot of online games. So what they want to do is they're coming out and they're saying, we're not even going to pretend anymore. We don't want you to save money. You don't have any sovereignty. You don't have any privacy. You don't have freedom of speech. This is a casino gulag. Here are your chips, and you go spend them in our casino, but you can't leave the gulag. We're going to survey you. We're going to keep tabs on you. We're going to harass you. We're going to shut down your freedom of speech. No freedom of defense, no sovereignty. We're going to put you in the gulag, in the prison, to shop, and you shop all day with our free fun coupons. So this is where we're at. I mean, this is happening. This is what their agenda is. They were prompted by Bitcoin to do this on a more accelerated pace because they now realize that Bitcoin is, as Christine Lagarde calls it, the escape hatch. So they're like, we got to move on this because otherwise we might have people actually saving hard money and being self-sovereign and enjoying freedom of speech, and that would kill our business model.
Yeah, you often say that you can't taper a Ponzi, and that's also what we're seeing with this digital dollar is like the way to extend that the fiat dollar is kind of at its end, right? It's 50 years old as of August 15th, which is fast approaching. And now they need a new kind of scheme to roll up all that debt into and roll up the Ponzi into. Um, I think it also like it's weird that it's coming right at the time where allegedly they're trying to deal with the equity issue. They keep on talking about this equity, the fact that this Ponzi scheme of 1971 started in 1971, the fiat dollar, and whoever was in their prime working years had many assets and things like that, or businesses that they owned at that time. If you were first in on that Ponzi, of course, 50 years later, you're magnificently wealthy for not all that much effort. So the equity of it, like women didn't have much a role in the economy before then. African Americans, of course, were excluded by Jim Crow up until the 1960s. So they're trying to say that they're going to do something to restore some sort of equity to the situation, and yet here they're saying at the same time we're introducing this digital dollar whereby you can't possibly save. So there's no way for you to even it's a way to exclude the competition in my mind.
Right. Equity is just the propaganda, right? There's no equity. It's just a feel-good word. It's a buzzword.
Mm.
It's like, doctors used to promote cigarettes back in the 1950s as being healthy for you, and we're constantly push things that are wrong, bad for us, unhealthy for us. And they put it under some propaganda. It's equity, it's equality, it's ESG, right?
Mm.
That's how you sell stuff, right? You got to sell stuff. It's a consumer economy. The economy in the United States and around the world is a consumer economy. And starting with Edward Bernays, post World War II, all of the consumption is driven by subliminal persuasion and psychological warfare. And the thing is that in an economy like the U.S. right now, you have essentially a demand shock on top of the supply shock. So you had the cheap money provide a supply shock of, a supply of goods.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were stacking up. Cars were just stacked up in parking lots. People, there more cars than ever would be bought. Um, and then all that fiat money was coming around and the GDP aspect of it was not really growing in a meaningful way, and they kept stimulating with more of this free money until the point where people started, they just didn't care anymore. So that became a shock to the system. So the way that they're going to get people to care to buy stuff is by giving the money an expiration date. So, here's $1,000 stimulus check. Here's a $10,000 stimulus check, and it expires in 18 months. You have to spend it now or it expires in 18 months. So, and by the way, here's a list of stuff you can buy. So it's literally like a .com gaming currency where, here's your free virtual money and here's the store where you can buy stuff. And we've got deals with every product in that store. You can't use the money we give you to buy Bitcoin. You can't use it to buy gold. You can't use it to buy anything that's going to appreciate in value unless you subscribe to America Prime, right? If you're willing to pay an annual fee, America, the subscription model, then you can buy stuff other than what's on our pre-programmed list, right? And so that's, that they're managing everybody like this gaming environment, which is this casino gulag environment. The vast majority, probably over 90% of the population, will be living literally in this virtual gaming environment, just clicking on ads to get protein pills to survive another 5 hours. And that's how most people are going to live. That's how most people live now. But it's not done efficiently. It's done inefficiently. So if somebody might live like that for a year or so, develop great, incredible neuroses, go to the psychiatrist, get pills for it, but they don't really see the economics of it. But here the economics are ripped open for everybody to see, and everyone will accept it. They'll be like, you know what? I feel much better now that I know that I'm just living on, Farmville 2.0 for Mark Zuckerberg, and I just give me my protein pill, and I'm fine with that because I've never known a reality different, right? And once you get past 20 years of this, there's no memory. The generation that remembers it is gone, and you have bred in a test tube baby of online gaming a new population of wage slaves, of pill slaves, of virtual currency slaves, and so we're we're going to get into it. By the time, let's say, it really takes hold in 20 years, I'll be in my 80s. It'll be, I'll tell stories about the way it used to be, and people will be like, okay, Grandpa, that's great. Time to get you to bed.
Right. And of course, look at the US system now as at the end of empire, declining empire. And what do you see? But what happens at the end of every single empire throughout history? Go do your own research, but you'll see it, that corruption and the civil war sort of mood and atmosphere, like viciousness, that hyper partisanship, what you see there. So imagine that now being weaponized. And you see the glee, for example, from Blue Check Twitter. Blue Check Twitter is primarily from the Democratic camp in the United States. And when a few years ago, when the mortality rate started to increase, life expectancy started to decline because of opioid overdoses, what did they do? They were in total glee, right? That it was mostly Trump voting states. So they were like, these people deserve to die. They were saying these people deserve to die because of COVID, because they won't wear masks, things like that. So now look at this paragraph. I'm going to read some to you from the New York Times editorial supporting a digital dollar in this hyper-partisan system, right? Where policy is a weapon, economic policy, fiscal policy, judicial policy, everything has been weaponized against one population, half of the population against the other. A central bank digital currency can also be a useful policy tool. So you're giving this tool to these unelected officials at the central bank to wield against the population. And remember, as Elon Musk had mentioned, the government is like a giant corporation, bigger than these corporations, and they have a monopoly on violence. So violence crime, you would consider something like robbery, theft. Now let's look at what the theft he's proposing as this policy tool. It's called a policy tool. Not like those kids in the viral video from a few days ago walking out of a TJ Maxx with all these clothes. This is this. Think of that. They stole under $900 worth of goods. If you do that, you don't get arrested in California. Still under $900 worth of goods. Here, they're stealing trillions worth of goods, right? Typically, if the Federal Reserve wants to stimulate consumption and investment, it can cut interest rates and make credit cheap. But if the economy is cratering and the Fed has already cut this short-term interest rate it controls to near zero, its options are limited. If cash, however, were replaced with a digital dollar, the Fed could impose a negative interest rate by gradually shrinking the electronic balances in everyone's digital currency accounts. So those kids in that viral video were just gradually shrinking the balances on the shelves of those clothing shelves. They were doing a favor to TJ Maxx.
Yeah. So, well, like I was saying there, the just pumping money into the economy is not. People aren't spending it fast enough. And
according to their metrics,
according to keep the Ponzi scheme alive.
Yeah, I mean, we do see that with the velocity of money, but the clear point is that, okay, Jeff Bezos was handed another $88 billion last year because of the Cantillon effect, right? It's hard to spend even half $500 million. Imagine having to try to spend $88 billion to get it into the economy.
Right, and people are saving, particularly the millennials, and because of Bitcoin. So they're not spending; they're saving, and they realize that actually saving makes sense. So, and it doesn't matter now; they can keep pumping more fiat money into it, and they're not going to get people to spend it. So now they're saying that, well, we're going to get the way we're going to get you to spend it is we're going to give it an elapsed time. We're going to give it a point at which you have to spend it by. It becomes null and void, right? So all the money you make, say all the money you have, it has a time limit, and then it goes like a frequent flyer mile. It's no longer good. You go into your wallet, bank, and it'll say, I know I have $10,000 in there, and you go and you'll say, time out. Got timed out. Doesn't exist anymore. So that's what they want to do.
So think of one of the most important things that we've discussed all the time about how Bitcoin changes you. One of the mechanisms, the most powerful mechanisms for changing you is that low time preference. Yeah. So here you see that this is what the central banks, this is what the elite are responding to, how they control you has been exposed, right? So the people in your mindset, how it's changing with the low time preference of Bitcoin. How are they responding? They're responding with saying they want to nudge you, force you into higher and higher time preference, right? They want you, if you don't spend that money today,
that's right,
they're going to take it from you.
That's
so
right.
What do? You're like a hamster in that wheel. Hurry up, look for something to buy.
That's right.
So it's just as bad as being in an eternal debt. You're always
Totally.
eager to spend your money. It's like those daytime TV shows. At least there were 25 years ago. I haven't seen them since, but there used to be a daytime TV show where they would take you into a shop, like some sort of mall or something, and give you a clothing store and say, here, you have, 35 seconds to spend to grab whatever you can. And you have to get to the checkout counter in those 35 seconds. So they would run in there and race and throw everything in their bag as much as possible and try to find the most expensive goods to put in the supermarket trolley. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And so you won't be able to opt out of the system because the only transactions allowed will be the transactions for things that they put on their official list to spend. So let's say you want to opt out of the system and you want to buy some tools to build a house for yourself. Well, those tools are not on the list, right? So you can't buy them. You have no money. Money's not good. Doesn't work. It only works on their approved list. And that approved list doesn't include the tools in that area to build a house.
Yes.
Right? So that's the gulag, right? You can only be in this house at this time to spend on these things, right? It's a prison. It's a virtual prison, and you cannot leave that prison. Or you can walk out of the prison at any time, but your money's not good. You can't communicate with anybody, and there's no services. The roads aren't being maintained. It's Mad Max world out there. But you're welcome to step into the Mad Max world at any time. But it's a hellhole. Or you can stay in the prison, and here's your money, and here's the list of stuff you can buy with your money, and here's the time in which you must spend that money on these things before the money goes to zero. And at that point, you may the walls around you in the prison cell disappear, and now you're in the wasteland. Right? So the walls are disappearing as the money is shrinking, is expiring. The walls are crumbling. So that to remind you that you need to spend quickly, because if you don't spend this fast, you're going to be in the wasteland. And so it's very Matrix like, the movie Matrix. It's very much like that, where
yes,
there's essentially we're in a virtual prison, and so.
But you're free. They're doing it for your own good.
Well, they use this word equity, right? So equity is the really great buzzword for the blue check crowd, because it makes you sound smart when you have, let's say, you went 2 years to a university before dropping out and becoming, a porn star. You can a word like equity appeals to you. So the blue check crowd will be like, this is all about equity, all about equity. So it's propaganda, of course. Brilliant Bernays, Edward Bernays, like post World War II propaganda genius, and it's coming. It's here. If they're saying, the central bank is saying, we're going to introduce a new central bank digital currency that has a negative interest rate and surveillance built into it, okay, that's it. That's a certain. If that's the casino gulag. So, and if it goes on for 10 or 15 years without a proper insurrection, then humanity as we know it is completely like Gaza, right? It's just an open air prison. It's just a prison. It's a prison. That's it. That's all. We'll all be living in Gaza.
So I recommend everybody go check out not only Alone in Berlin, which I always recommend in terms of your snitch neighbors will end up turning you in to the authorities, no matter how much you resist. Also go to U.S. Politics Twitter. It's worth checking out just to see the mindset of what is coming at you with the authoritarians. They genuinely, like every authoritarian in history, genuinely 100% believe they're doing it for your own good, that they're doing it for everybody's good, that they're locking you down for your own good, that they're going to give you, they're going to take your money out of your electronic balance sheet for your own good. There's a law being passed right today, I think it is, where they're banning menthol cigarettes because many Black people prefer menthol cigarettes. So they're doing it to save Black people, they say. So that's a targeted, like if you have a surveillance currency and a surveillance bank account watching everything you consume and do, maybe they don't want you to buy a node. Maybe Elon Musk already knows that this is coming, that you don't want to run a Bitcoin full node. You don't want to run a Lightning node. You don't want to do this. And they won't let you, it won't even be possible to buy it, right? With your electronic digital dollars.
Yeah, I saw on Black Twitter some funny things about that. So menthol cigarettes are definitely popular in Black communities, right? Newport and Salem.
Yeah.
This is a popular brand. And another study concurrently was that people who have nicotine from smoking are resistant to COVID. So on Black Twitter, yeah, they were saying that, just when it turns out that smoking a Salem cigarette was going to help me fight COVID, they ban it, right? Whitey be banning, this is obviously Whitey's tricks again, right? Which, hey, I can't tell you that's not Whitey's tricks. I mean, the track record is there to see.
Oh my God. That data also came out about 2020. You probably saw it, is in all the Twitter stream of the life expectancy dropped by 1.5 years in the United States, which was the largest drop since World War II. World War II obviously killed far fewer than, who died of COVID last year. But, as obviously most of the soldiers were under 30, the life expectancy dropped across the U.S. back in the 1940s because of all the young guys who died. Well, so the data here was quite interesting too, because speaking of trolleys, there's the trolley problem. Everybody is a basic 101 sort of ethics class sort of experiment. There's a runaway railroad trolley, and it's going to run over these 5 people here, but you can divert it to just run over those 2 people there. So we've encountered that basically on the national and international scale, which is in the United States. So the life expectancy declined by 1.5 due to the 600,000 deaths of COVID. But for white people in general, both male and female, it was down 1.2 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's because it was mostly older people in the old folks' homes, right? The elderly are mostly white in the old folks' homes. So they died, didn't take much off the life expectancy of the average white person. The one that got hit the hardest were Hispanic males. Their life expectancy dropped by 3.5 to 4 years because they were the essential workers. They're not in the old folks' homes. They're the essential workers. They're working at the meat packing factories. They're manufacturing. They're at all the essential jobs that they weren't able to stay home, work from home. So you saw that in the numbers because it's working age guys. That's why the numbers, it took more years off the life expectancy of the average Hispanic. Of course, they also live in larger families and together, like grandma's there, aunts and uncles. They're all like close family. So close family in this COVID situation also exposed more people.
Right. So the blue checks are saying that we should lock down the economy, and because we're going to save lives.
Yep.
But the numbers tell us that locking down the economy and keeping the essential workers that are mostly Hispanic resulted in a death wave of Hispanics.
Yes.
So the white blue check people who are saying, let's shut down the economy are giving a death sentence to millions of Hispanic essential workers who are doing minimum wage jobs and like meat packing and things like that, where the white blue check people are readily consuming and happy to consume such, right? So where's the equity in that? Where's the equity in that blue check?
Yeah, they never had an answer. I asked that often. You saw that back even a year ago. I was asking I was responding to their hysteria, right? They were the hysteric delivery of their message that we need to lock down. And I was like, well, what about the minimum wage worker at the checkout counter at, Whole Foods?
Right. There's no equity, and that's racist.
They had no answer for it, right? So this was a real world experiment of that trolley problem. So they just ignored it like it didn't exist. And like, well, you are choosing to kill certain people. And by the way, the fact that they were forced to work, they didn't collect the digital dollars, right? They didn't collect the $600 enhanced unemployment benefits. So these suckers had to not only face death, but they had to do it without even getting the free money that everybody else who was working from home got to keep.
Right. So blunt force trauma policies by government is resulting in social dysfunction and people opting out of the economy. And that's being responded to by the central banks, who decide to now put an expiration date on your money, that if you don't spend it like a frequent flyer mile within the allotted time, it's going to disappear. So, okay, this has taken a leap into another kind of confrontational era, if you will. And the bad guys are the central banks, as we've been saying now for almost 20 years. Those are the bad guys. It's not China. It's not Russia. It's not, it's the central banks, the global central banks versus everybody else. And Bitcoin is the anecdote, and countries like El Salvador figured that out, and they've made it legal tender. And so we see the battle emerging, and this is the 36 months is going to be key. It's going to be crucial. And that, I guess, that getting back to Elon, that's where it's frustrating. Like, he shows flashes of brilliance, kind of. It's like the raisins in a very bland rice pudding, right? Most of what he says is just very bland and innocuous, inane dribble. And then there's a raisin here and there. It's like a little flash of brilliance, like, oh, yeah, the government is a giant corporation. And then you're like, okay, tell me more. But now he's off giggling about, having whatever. And so he's not helpful in any way. It would probably be more helpful if he just shut up. But like, that's why we say fuck Elon. Like, if you're not going to really take this seriously, then shut the fuck up. We don't need you. We don't even know where your loyalties are. We don't know where the fuck you are. So just shut the fuck up. That's why we're doing another fuck Elon event in Phoenix, Arizona on August 19th.
Yeah.
Tickets are selling. The crowds are coming. We've got all kinds of excitement brewing, and it's in Phoenix, Arizona. It promises to be about 190 degrees Fahrenheit. So for worshipers of the sun, this is your chance.
Worship the sun, and we're gonna have a great, we're gonna sun our balls. All
Definitely.
of us are gonna meet together by the pool, sun our balls. Of course, those little raisins. Once you get up close, you see it's actually little poo emojis for his shit coins. Like,
right.
Oh my God, he dropped that Doge at the most ridiculous moments yesterday. It was so embarrassing and cringe for real. But we were just talking about COVID and the lockdowns and stuff. I have this interesting little tidbit of the most searched words and the most misspelled words last year, according to Google Trends.
Okay.
For quarantine, many Americans spelled it corn, CORN.
Right. Quarantine.
Quarantine, like teenager. So, which is quite interesting because most of it happened in the Corn Belt, I have to say. So it was like they hear corn and they know corn. It's all around them and they think that's quarantine.
Quarantine.
But it's obviously Generation Z, right? This is the new generation. Corn is the answer. The Bitcoin, their corn is going to save them from the need for quarantine. The reason why we had the quarantine and the COVID and stuff is the central bank policy, is the super high time preference that they want to get even faster. They want you to go even more parabolic with your time preference. So in a way, I think that whole corn syrup is, of course, part of the problem of why so many died, why we have a decline in life expectancy by 1.5 years.
True.
All that corn syrup. So all of these, we are in
corn pop. Remember Joe Biden?
Corn pop.
He and corn pop was at the pool. Corn pop was a bad dude.
Yeah. So this is obviously what we're saying is we know the cats are running this simulation.
Yeah.
They think this is funny and that we won't notice this shit. But we see it. We see what you're doing with that quarantine there.
Yeah, quarantine. What else?
What else? Right. So I do have this other interesting story too of by the way, the photo in this New York Times piece, the guy is like super, super huge. He's had a little bit too much corn syrup. And that is, there's this huge drought out west.
Okay.
And what we can tell from the archaeological records and from the sediment records is that basically almost the entirety of the U.S. West has been in drought for the past few thousand years. And we had actually a brief period of just like utopia in terms of the weather, right? It was Shangri-La weather. You could grow things. California could become a big, rich agricultural state. But it's returning to its norm, it seems. It's been the worst drought on record for the past 10 years based on our modern records of like 150 years. So as this kind of just seems like it's an analogy for our where's my money central bank shrinking balance digital dollar system. And that is, in a drought, water witches are swamped. Amid California's drought, desperate landowners and managers are turning to those who practice an ancient, disputed method for locating water. And as you see, he has like these little divining sticks.
Yeah, divining rods. Well, he's so fat that the gravitational pull of his belly can tell you where the water is.
His name is, they have a quote from him, "This one I can feel I could feel it.
I
Of
can
course.
feel it.
Well, Max wrote a script actually about these sort of people who do seances and can forecast the future and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The I forget what the name for these people are.
Spiritualists.
Spiritualists, right? This is like modern day spiritualism as the system collapses, because that's when they come in. That's why we had so much spiritualism in the 19 teens. Is it's
Yep.
post World War I, like mass death on a industrial scale. We saw the bird flu, the Spanish flu, mass death on an industrial scale. So people were looking for answers, and they turned to witches.
Yeah, it's so weird because, okay, the same week you had billionaire Jeff Bezos build a rocket for himself and fly into outer space. Obviously, there's a lot of technology there, a lot of money involved, while some fat corn syrup guzzling nincompoop in the middle of the deserts with a twig trying to divine where the water is, right? We live in two different worlds here. It's like, when those helicopters show up in some Arizona, Amazonian undeveloped area where the natives have never seen anything technological, right? I mean, that's happening in the U.S. People are resorting to spiritualism, tarot card readings, astrology, to try to make sense of the world. Meanwhile, the money is there. Obviously, the technology is there in the billionaire class. But they're like, separating. There's this huge separation going on. Neo-feudalism, right? So, I mean, this guy's living as a serf in a feudal caste, Middle Ages, Dark Ages economy. That man is essentially living in the 1300s, somewhere in the middle of Nowheresville, right before the plague of 1400 in Europe, while Bezos is flying around like Zeus in a spaceship, peeing in a bottle to show solidarity with his workers at the Amazon factory.
Right. Well, his name is Rob Thompson, and they say he's a water witch, and he claims that he can locate gushing streams of water beneath the Earth's bedrock. Amid California's extreme drought, his services are in demand, but not everyone is convinced. The title says 2 rods and a 6th sense.
They've got, satellites taking 3D images of the crust of the Earth down several hundred miles 24/7. They can tell you, if you lost a tooth and you flush it down the toilet 20 years ago, what landfill it currently resides in. And this guy with fucking unemployed those people who eat couches, the foam out of couches. This guy looks like he's an Olympic couch foam chomper. He's out there his stimulus check dried up. So he picks up, a bicycle spoke from the dump and says, I can find water. Not, ironically, it's all on his belly because he weighs like 900 pounds. And the media reports on this like it's not a fucking joke. I sound like Doug Stanhope.
Right. Well, I mean, it sounds his business model sounds a little bit more sound than most of the entire DeFi shitcoin market, right? At least he's got it. Look, he's actually got to stand up there and pose for the cameras and pretend he's doing something.
Yeah, I thought it was Charles Hoskinson's at first. He kind of looks like Charles Hoskinson, and they're trying to divine whether or not Cardano is centralized or decentralized.
Yeah.
Hey, guess what? It's centralized, and that guy is a charlatan, and so is the other guy.
I don't need a water witch, but I sure could go for a sandwich.
That's right. Remember the ditch witch out there in the Hamptons in Montauk?
Not the Hamptons. It's Montauk.
Yeah, the Montauk. They have a great
South
place
Fork
for a coffee in the morning on the surfing beach on Ditch Plains.
Don't tell anybody the secret.
No, that's a big secret. Only 500,000 people showed up last Saturday morning, and it's called the Ditch Witch. It's pretty fun. That's another extreme of consciousness that just came into. Where is Doug Stanhope? I mean, the guy
Bisbee.
And that's in
Arizona. Maybe we should take everybody from the Fuck Elon tour.
Yeah.
And we should go down to Bisbee.
How far away is Bisbee from Phoenix?
It's probably a 2-hour drive. I think it's past Tucson. It's right on the border with Mexico.
We should hire Doug Stanhope to appear at the event.
We'd have to raise a lot of corn to pay him.
Maybe not. I hear he's totally broke. He's probably do it for less money than this guy in the desert with his bicycle spoke looking for water underneath Jeff Bezos's mansion.
I think he likes to live near the border to go for some basically you can get any pharmaceuticals you might need
The
over across the
cistern
border.
in the water tank in Jeff Bezos' yacht is bigger than the aquifer in the southeast west that's keeping Las Vegas alive.
True, true. Well, at least Vegas is north of Phoenix. You know, all that stuff. Phoenix, Tucson, those are south of Vegas.
Yeah, yeah.
And
If anyone listening knows Doug Stanhope or anybody in Bisbee, Nevada,
not Nevada, it's
in
Arizona.
Arizona, okay, contact them. Tell them we got a gig for him. We could pipe him in over the TV, do it cheap. You can hire him. From what I saw, you can get him to do a Skype call with you or a Zoom call with you for like $10, right? Why don't we hire the guy to come in on a Zoom call and at least, but bring him in person. I think bring him in person. We could probably get him. We'll throw him a sandwich. I mean, the guy is after the COVID, he's like barely able to go. It's day to day with this guy. Give him a drink. That's it. Doug Stanhope, you're hired. Call me immediately to make arrangements. You're needed in Phoenix, Arizona, and the name of the bar is Last Exit Live. That's right.
Some morons in the group is talking about he obviously missed the first part of our conversation where we were talking about that for the past 1,000 years, essentially the West has been drought. So he's like they're shouting, saying, "Oh, weather is always like this." But he does mention something else that is wrong as well, which is not proof that people can't control the weather. That we've seen that in the past week. I saw 2 headlines that in the UAE, because obviously it's like a desert, they've started to seed the clouds. Have you seen the video of this like monsoon style rain that they incited?
Oh, right.
To rain and like basically, cool down the roads, the tarmac,
right,
and just so that the heat island, what's that heat island effect? So to reduce that. And I also saw Russia just announced that they were doing that because they're also having huge heat waves over the past few years. But out in Siberia, they've been seeding the clouds in order to rain and try to keep the tundra from burning. So
yeah. That's great. No, I don't understand why people deny the climate catastrophe, the climate holocaust. I mean, I guess it's like those monks during the Vietnam War who set themselves on fire. Remember those self-immolation? They got very famous. A lot of photos from them that time. These orange robed monks, burning themselves on fire as they became martyrs for something. So, I mean, I understand if you're a martyr and you want to, stand out there and burn up to a crisp for your ideology, which is based on severe, moronic imbecility. Okay,
yeah,
you're free to do that, but it doesn't change the fact that you're wrong.
it doesn't change the fact that humans don't change. We're not going to change. Like, what do you
No.
like? We throughout human history, what we do is we just migrate, right?
No, when somebody's setting themselves on fire, my instinct is to put the fire out. But I've learned in the case of these climate change deniers to just let them burn.
Okay, so are you? Okay,
you're let them burn, baby. Too. Burn.
You're gonna burn too.
Burn, baby.
But that's
burn.
what I said at the beginning of the show. That's why people should check out Twitter. Is like you see this desire for other people to die. Like there is a sense that there are people who are very angry. Max is very angry and wants some people to burn. Like that's what you see across the political space too. Like people want everybody to die.
No, I want them to express their free speech.
Well, I think there is a sense, like there's a sense of I guess I don't know, the world maybe is should disconnect from the internet and just chill out and just like realize that whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Like, you can't stop entropy. You can't stop an empire from collapsing because it's destined to. You can't stop the powerful from losing their power. You can't stop it. Like,
But if you had a choice between experiencing reality on reality's terms or experiencing reality as a delusional, misinformed idiot, which would you pick?
there's I think it would take a while for me to figure that out, because there are positives and negatives to every single one. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't want to be a 600-pound, potato chip eating, corn syrup swilling, ignoramus, but who knows? Maybe they have a good family life or something. Maybe there's some joy in their life somewhere. But I am who I am, and that's all I could express and all I could be. And it's not like some human behaviors don't disturb me, but they're inevitable. All things are inevitable because of physics, because of nature, because of life cycles, because of business cycles, because of psychological cycles. Hubris is constant. That's why the central bank is issuing an ever shrinking digital dollar. Like, this is like, it's already been done and thought of before. Like, they're all going to do it. They're all like, but also humans, we're not going to stop. Like, no creature stops their behavior, even if it's trashing their own environment. Like, that we're not going to stop. Like, we're flying to Phoenix. I'm not going to stop flying.
Well, I tell you, you mentioned the internet there. What's interesting is that at the dawn of the internet age, people thought that, wow, there's so much information available to everybody. We're going to naturally gravitate toward being better informed. And yet, that wasn't the case at all. And in fact, the case can be made that we're less informed, which is remarkable, because I was around at the dawn of the internet age. And if you told me that within 30 years, people's general understanding of how things work would be much less, I would have thought that's the least likely outcome to happen. And yet here we are.
But also, like, people, okay, for a fact, we know that if we imposed a federal speed limit of 40 miles an hour, right? So that all highways, you can only ever go 40 miles an hour and you couldn't go any higher, we would reduce deaths by thousands per year. But the people say, fuck you, government. We want to go 70. I'm not going to go 40 on this highway from Arizona down to Bisbee, because then it's going to take me forever. It's too slow.
Right. Now, the pushback against that won't be the reality of we're willing to die to get to Carvel ice cream shop faster. That's the reality of it.
That's the
But
reality.
that's not what the argument they'll make. They'll say that your statistics are wrong, right? You're reading the numbers wrong, and that study was discredited. And according to Ayn Rand, you're completely wrong, right? So that's where we get an interesting dichotomy, where a cognitive split on the societal level. That's why we have a mass breakdown and psychotic episode happening around the world currently, is because people just are not really honest with themselves. Let's just be honest with yourself. You're willing to die to get ice cream faster.
Of
That's the
course.
reality.
But most
Okay,
people will say that. They don't care. Everybody's got to die. That's unfortunate, but it's fucking true. And this is the thing that's also missing from the public discourse about COVID. It's like,
I bet you, I bet you this Bitcoin grenade that if you go into the comments right now, the first thing you'll see is people questioning the fact that the speed limit reduction to less road casualties is incorrect for the fill in the blank reasons. I'm absolutely positive that's what you'll find.
not one.
Not one. Okay.
Okay.
I owe you one of these grenades.
You owe me a grenade. No, I think people realize that if you crash into a wall at 75 miles an hour,
Yeah.
it's going to look a whole lot different than if you crash into a wall at 40 miles an hour. It's going to just look different. You know it for a fact, right?
Yeah.
If you get hit by a car, if you're a pedestrian going 70 miles, the car is going 70 miles an hour, or the car is going 40, you have a 50-50 chance of surviving the 40 mile per hour one. You have 0 chance of surviving it at 70. So it's just basic physics. But that's the same thing with, the notion that we're here now in the present, and we're suddenly saying, oh shit, this 50 years of fiat money and all of this debt and pulling forward the consumption of the next 50 years. Well, how do we get the basically the only way to restore equilibrium is to somehow get the next 50 years worth of generation living, put them in lockdown, reduce their consumption, force them to basically consume. And you can see that in the Fed's own data. So the Fed right now, okay, inflation's ripping. And what did the Fed say this past week? They said they're making up for that gap. There's some great charts online. I think it's Tavi Costa. He has this chart where it shows the inflation trend, because so the Fed wants 2% inflation over the past 20 years. And there's a gap from about 2008 up to about 2015-16 where it's under their target. So right now it's over their target. So they're saying that's making up for when it was under 2%. So this is the makeup for that. So that's what I'm saying as well about, there's no way to stop it. All you could do to reconcile the fact, to reconcile your books that you've already spent the next 50 years of consumption, of economic growth, of carbon emissions, of all the things that are needed for that, is like somehow reduce the living standards radically for the next generation. And I just don't think you could do that. I don't think you could do that. Like, you can't tell the people of Nigeria or Mali or, Bolivia. You can't say, okay, dudes, don't look at Twitter, don't look at Instagram or all those magazines of how we've been living. Just like stay home. Don't buy a car. Don't fly anywhere. Like it's just not going to happen. That's because of human nature. They're going to be like, fuck that. I don't care. You got to fly all over the place for cheap on EasyJet and just like do all this stuff. And I'm going to do it now because, our economies are rising, whether it's in, Latin America or Africa or Asia.
Definitely, we have a changing of the guard to different economies, right?
Yes.
In Africa, with Paxville in Africa and Nigeria and other hotspots, I mean, they're really emerging from this COVID era as a growth engine. Latin America could be emerging as a growth engine. The U.S., Europe, and the U.K. looks like they might be headed into a slowdown, a massive slowdown, because Asia and China, right? They look like they're managing something. They've got a plan, right? Russia, they've got a plan. Yeah. Only the U.S., Europe, and the U.K. seem like they don't really have a plan. They don't have much leadership. The leadership is completely caught off guard. Clearly, in the United States, the current president is demonstrably having cognitive issues. I mean, that's not. I don't think if anyone is in denial about that, that would fall into the category of you're free to light yourself on fire and die in the middle of the street. I'm not going to stop you at this point, type thinking. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But
so, I mean, you're right there, because again, tying it back to all of these cycles of what's happening, quarantine, right? Nobody had any sense that you weren't allowed to even speak about it on Twitter, but you did see like all this shrieking, we need to shut down. Oh my God, what's going to happen to Africa? I asked back in May of 2020, well, like the average age of many, many countries in Africa is like 16, the median age, 16, 17, 18. And you're like, what? Like 18-year-olds don't get affected by COVID. Oh, almost zero obesity as well, right? So this is the future. They're like, what they're saying now is that this COVID coronavirus is going to keep on mutating. We're going to keep on having variants, and they're going to keep on needing to shut down. Why? Because we're obese. Because we've spent all the future. Like half the population of America already consumed. Literally, you could see it in their bodies. They consumed enough for 3 or 4 people.
Well, didn't a lot of the COVID money end up in Nigeria?
Well, that's good, because they're going to need it. That's their seed capital.
I mean, that's how disorganized it is.
But Nigeria is not the youngest of them, but they're younger and thinner. So if Western economies keep on needing to shut down, the good thing is that by necessity, those African nations will have to pivot to find other sources of goods and services.
Mhm.
Like they can't just rely on the US banking system, the US dollar, goods from outside, because all those other fat old people in those rich countries are going to need to constantly shut down and stay in their
Yeah,
homes.
they're doing it now. So the biggest obstacle was, as you mentioned, the dollar and the banking system. That was an obstruction to growth, because it was a gatekeeping situation. So now with Bitcoin, there's ability to grow independently, have your own sovereignty, and so that's what we're seeing. Speaking of Africa, so in South Africa, I was reading that the unemployment rate is like 45%. So that's like saying there's no jobs at all, really. I mean, so that looks like that's not what's going on.
So yeah, it's super super sad because this is the thing. Like the elite do distract us with all these identity politics, but the fact is, you have a new oligarchy, same as the old oligarchy there, right? So all of the government investment, all of the foreign direct investment goes to a group of oligarchs who control all flows of funds into and out of that economy. And with that sort of oligarchy, the life of the teens and the 20-year-olds is just like they're not needed. They feel they're not needed. They don't need to think about the whole economy because they've got all they need, right? They've got they live in their own citadel surrounded by moats and
Hmm.
military personnel to keep the poor and hungry out. And it's ridiculous.
Right.
And
So there you have a real example of this emerging wasteland, zombie land versus the citadels and moats,
yeah.
totally driven by, and they do have their own currency and their own central bank. So it's easier for them to create this dystopian nightmare. And it's not going to look like it's going to reverse anytime soon. So there's going to be countries that definitely go down that path. The central bank here is saying that they're going to introduce expiration dates on the money. This is the South Africa is kind of a model for where they're going. So you're going to be either living behind a moat in a castle in a citadel, or you're going to be out there fighting it out with the zombies, right?
So we talked. Remember, we spoke about this when we went to dinner in Miami with Safety Moose and his Bitcoin, his carnivore dinner. So we sat next to these two Argentinian guys who said they moved to America every 10 years because every 10 years there's a crisis, a monetary crisis in Argentina. So in a way, it just like right when you were saying that about the expiration date on the digital dollar is because in an all fiat world, of course, there's always one leper with the most fingers, right? The best looking horse in the glue factory, as you say. So the dollar has the problem that it's the other currency. So the rand, the South African rand, has an expiration date. It's so same as Argentina. It collapses every 10 years.
Hmm.
So you
Hmm.
better spend and consume and do your shit before it collapses because it will collapse.
Right. Not officially, but unofficially. And so the central banks want to make it official.
The US central bank and the European central bank want to make it official
Right.
because their currencies don't collapse like that because
Right.
it's all relative, right? Because in an all relative fiat world, it's those other currencies, even if the dollar is declining in value or the euro is declining in value, it's relative to these other
Right.
currencies.
So Satoshi, with the idea of programmable money, said, let's program something better than gold, the
Yes.
scarcest, hardest money ever in the history of the universe, and free mankind from misery. Central bank got the idea of programmable money and said, let's create global frequent flyer mile money and disenfranchise the globe and take a cut. And we're going to commit a mass global holocaust with our bank. It's two different approaches, isn't it?
So also, South Africa, you could see the future for places like Nigeria, places like Saudi Arabia, in that South Africa was like the largest producer of gold in the world,
Yeah.
the hardest money that humans had for the last 5,000 years until Bitcoin. And yet they instead chose the rand, which collapses every 10 years.
Right.
So they gave it away for some fiat.
Mm-hmm.
They have no gold of their own. they could have instead like leveraged that gold in a much more clever way to not end up in this situation of total economic ruin.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Really, they don't. I don't think the South African central bank has any gold on their balance sheet. I haven't looked lately, but I've never seen it. Certainly in the top tier of banks with lots of gold, like Germany, the U.S., Russia, China. So Canada dumped all of its gold. The Great Britain sold half of its gold under Gordon Brown. They had 600 tons. They've now got 300 tons. So these countries, really bought into the fiat money nightmare, and now the fiat money nightmare is going to get a lot worse.
Yeah. And Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, like places that have like that sort of singular economy just based on one thing, oil, in those two cases.
Yeah.
Once that runs out, they're going to see the same sort of situation that we're seeing right now in South Africa or Lebanon. There's a lot of weird stuff is going to happen over the next year
I have a
because
question for you. So I see like Mercedes-Benz and other car companies are saying that we're going to be completely electric within 10 years. So it looks like the global car market is going to be mostly electric within 10 years. So how does that impact the demand for oil? It seemed like it would cut the demand for oil quite sharply.
Yes, you would think so. You would think so. Also, however, presumably the US military will get even bigger in the next 10 years, and it is the largest single consumer of oil in the world.
Uh-huh.
If we're building more F-35s and things like that, we're going to need more oil. So if we have a panopticon sort of global digital dollar system and we have to start monitoring like how people are spending their money in the heart of Goa or
Yeah.
something, like we might need to send out special forces all over the place. Who knows? Maybe that's the only hope for places like Saudi Arabia. Yeah, I don't know. Like what happens then? It'll be interesting to see.
How about this?
You would think that the military, the Pentagon, has already game planned it, war planned it out, because otherwise they would have stopped it, tried to stop it if it's going to lose. They're going to lose control over the U.S. dollar.
Right. So there was that big story last week. Katie the Russian was interviewed on a number of stations about selling passports, or enabling people to buy second passports. And the cost is roughly, $50,000 to $200,000. You can get a second passport. And the advantages and disadvantages of this and the cost of these second passports seems to be falling. What if at some point countries start to pay people to move there and say, we'll pay you $200,000 in Bitcoin to move to Saudi Arabia because we're running out of oil, and we'll pay you $200,000 to come here. What about that? Because they could just say, we don't want your depreciating fiat money US dollar because the petrodollar is finished. We don't want to have our economy return to where it was 100 years ago, which was basically no economy. So we're going to pay you $100,000 to $200,000 in Bitcoin to come and live in Riyadh. And we're going to give you all these things that you're not getting anymore in your respective countries.
So I think the thing that stood out the most to me in that New York Times piece on her, I think it was New York Times or CNBC, is that she's Russian. She left Russia. She has her second passport. She doesn't have to pay taxes to Russia. The American media, that same media, will tell you that she's less free than Americans. Americans are the freest people on earth. If you're an American with more than $2 million of net worth, go ahead. Go buy a passport. See how easy it is. See if you can leave. You can't leave. It's not possible.
Right. You pay an exit tax on anything over $2 million.
You have to pay 50% of all your wealth, even though it's like your savings. You've built up your wealth.
Right.
You've already been taxed on it. Now,
right.
if they're going to tax you, take 50% of your wealth if you leave the country.
And then
you still have to file, as Roger Ver has noted, you have to file taxes for 7 years after.
Right.
Maybe even 10. Because they have to make they're checking to see if you had any assets that you didn't tell them about when you exited.
Right. There's only I think 2 or 3 countries in the world that have a similar system. One of the others is North Korea.
Yeah, North Korea. Yeah. So I thought that stood out. So yes, and there could be a world like, and as the U.S. empire disintegrates and things, and the business model changes. It's never a smooth transition, right? There's all sorts of chaos and tumult. before the new beginning, the new Renaissance. So, everybody else in the world but Americans will be free to pretty much go wherever they want and move to the best place, or those who are, willing to pay them to move there and do that. But we'll Max and I will still be here
Well, the
with
one
live
thing,
streaming it.
well, we pay the taxes for basically the First Amendment because we've lived in other countries and we've traveled around the world. And in fact, the speech freedom in the U.S. at this time is still better than any other country out there, including some ones you wouldn't expect, like the UK, where you had a certain expectation about free speech, but it turns out it doesn't exist. And so that is worth something. It's worth paying for the licensing for my free speech license. I pay every April to Uncle Sam, and that does have some value to it. How long that lasts, I think, as that crumbles. If the speech rights in the U.S. were to collapse to be on a par with everybody else in the world, then there literally is no reason to live here at all.
You don't have any option, though. It's literally like the North Korea or the Soviet Union or those sort of states where you had to Qatar, UAE, those sort of states as well have an exit visa you need to get to leave the country. We essentially have an exit visa here as well. So
right. So the prison model is the trend is for the prison model. So what we're saying is that the expiration date money guarantees the gulag casino and the prison model, and that people are wed to this system where they pay you in the expiration money and you can only buy stuff at the store, the company store, at the prices they guarantee, and you can't make any other type of money, you can't save any other type of money, and you can't spend it on anything other than what the company says you can spend it on. So it's Farmville, and it's being built by the people who built Farmville, right? So the dot-com entrepreneurs of that era, the Peter Thiels, the Elon Musks, Jeff Bezos, the Google folks, Apple, right? All the people who became of age and became billionaires because of the internet are now pulling up the drawbridge and creating the casino gulag because they're cunts.
Right. Well, that's a good moment to wrap this up because you know what? I have to reset. We have to interview Bobo Dread. He's going to be on the Full Dose this week talking about his girth on his lightning node and his lightning channel.
Lovely.
And that's it for this episode. Make sure you smash that like button. Unless you're a dick, don't do it then. If you're an incel, don't hit that like button. So, if there's 700, 800 people live streaming right now watching this, I'd expect probably 200 are incels. So don't click the like button if you're an incel. So we're gonna have some evidence right here. I'm looking at the evidence. I'm trying to reverse psychology.
Oh, I get it. Oh,
I'm saying, if you're not an incel, then hit the like button.
All right, that'll work.
Okay. Well, that was the talk between Max Kaiser and Stacy Herbert.
That's cool.
The real talk.
The birds and the bees.
The birds and the bees. Relentless optimism.
Yep.
Go smash. Buy some stats.
So that's where babies come from.
Stats,
Jesus,
some
I never
stats.
knew. I thought it was the stork.
Buy some stats. Buy some stats at swanbitcoin.com/orange pill. Make sure you go do that.
Don't be a cunt.